The Talisman Wizard is back with podcast episode number 2. Welcome, folks. Today we're going to continue our tournament of Talisman characters fighting each other. The previous episode we used a site called whowouldwininafight.info. I was just trying to use that site again today, but it seemed to not be functioning properly. So I decided to go with an AI story generator from aistorygenerator.org. I plugged in the names of the characters and it went from there. And so it gave some interesting descriptions and ultimately chose the winners of the next 3 battles. It has pretty good little story bits here, which don't necessarily describe perfectly how these characters from Talisman would be, but it's still interesting enough, and it goes with the theme of what I'm going for here, which, as I said in the previous episode, is not really to make like a tier list sort of thing like a lot of people do with Talisman characters. This is just more of, like I said, a fictional rendition of what these characters, how they would fight each other and who would come out on top. So we're going to continue that with the AI giving us the answers here and giving us the story. And so the next fight, we'll go over who won the previous fights. We had Ancient Oak versus Prophetess. The Prophetess won. We had the Elf versus Tavern Maid. The Elf won. Valkyrie versus Spy. Valkyrie came out on top. Priest and Ascendant Divine duked it out, and the Priest won. Dark Cultist versus Elementalist. Elementalist won. Druid versus Minstrel. The Minstrel won. Mutant versus Warlock. The Warlock won. And Leprechaun versus Tinkerer. The Tinkerer was victorious. And so, I've already generated the winners for the next 3 fights, but I will go ahead and read through the stories and then the story will reveal who wins. We're just going to do 3 battles today. And the first one's going to be the Conjurer versus Alchemist, then Fire Wizard versus Doomsayer, and Cat Burglar versus Dread Knight. We'll just do those 3 today, and I'll continue in a further episode. Episode 3 we'll just probably do them in bunches of 3, but we'll see how it goes. So, let's get on with it. Alchemist versus Conjurer. AI generated story from aistorygenerator.org. All right. In the dimly lit tavern, the air was thick with tension as the 2 opponents faced off. The alchemist, a tall and lean figure draped in billowy robes, stood calmly before the conjurer, his eyes fixed intently on his foe. The conjurer, a slight man with wild hair and a mischievous glint in his eye, sneered at the alchemist, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "You think you can defeat me with your puny potions and crude transmutations?" the conjurer taunted, his voice dripping with disdain. "I am a master of the arcane arts, while you are but a mere dabbler in the dark sciences." The alchemist smiled grimly, his hands clasped behind his back. "We shall see," he replied, his voice low and even. "My art is not so weak as you believe it to be." With a sudden flourish, the conjurer drew his sword and hurled it at the alchemist. The weapon flashed through the air, leaving a trail of sparks in its wake. But the alchemist was ready for him, and with a swift gesture he summoned a wall of flame to block the attack. The sword struck the blaze with a shower of sparks, and the conjurer cried out in pain as the heat singed his skin. Undeterred, the conjurer launched another assault, this time casting a spell that caused the ground beneath the alchemist's feet to shake and tremble. But the alchemist countered with a blast of compressed air, sending the conjurer flying across the room. As the 2 combatants clashed, their magic raging around them like a tempest, the patrons of the tavern watched in awe. They had never seen such a fierce battle before, and they knew that only one of these men would emerge victorious. For hours they fought, their spells and incantations weaving together in a deadly dance, but gradually the alchemist began to gain the upper hand. His potions were more powerful, his transmutations more precise, and the conjurer grew wearier by the minute. Finally, with a mighty cry, the alchemist raised his staff high overhead and unleashed a bolt of pure energy that struck the conjurer with devastating force. The latter stumbled backwards, his body limp and lifeless, and the alchemist stood triumphant. The patrons cheered and clapped, their faces flushed with excitement. The alchemist bowed graciously, his chest heaving with exertion. He had proven himself the superior practitioner of the arcane arts, and no one could deny it. But as he turned to leave, he noticed something strange. A faint glow emanated from the conjurer's body, a light that seemed almost otherworldly. And then, with a burst of magical energy, the conjurer vanished into thin air, leaving only a trace of his presence. The alchemist frowned thoughtfully, wondering what had just occurred. Had the conjurer been defeated after all, or had he simply retreated to plot his revenge? Only time would tell. Well, interesting AI story there, but we shall declare the alchemist the victor. So, I will write that down in the bracket, and we shall move on to Fire Wizard versus Doomsayer. Fire Wizard versus Doomsayer. I had to change a few things because this one had given them names, and I decided to change the names just to the Talisman characters. And anyway, here we go. In the land of Talisman, where magic and technology coexisted in a world of steam-powered machines and ancient spells, two powerful wizards faced off in a battle that would decide the fate of their kingdom. One was a master of flame and heat, the Fire Wizard, who had spent his entire life studying the arcane arts of pyromancy. The other was the Doomsayer, a prophet of darkness and despair who believed that the end times were near and that only he could save the world from destruction. As the armies of Talisman watched in horror, the Fire Wizard and the Doomsayer began to summon their powers, each one determined to emerge victorious. The air was filled with the scent of ozone and smoke as they cast spell after spell, their magic clashing in a spectacular display of light and sound. The Fire Wizard called upon the elements, commanding the flames to dance at his feet and conjuring great waves of heat to engulf his opponent. But the Doomsayer was not easily defeated, his dark magic causing the ground to shake and tremble beneath their feet. He summoned creatures of shadow and darkness to do his bidding, sending them forth to attack the Fire Wizard with teeth and claws. Despite his best efforts, the Fire Wizard found himself on the defensive, struggling to keep the creatures at bay while still maintaining his own attacks. He knew that he couldn't hold out for much longer, but he refused to give up. This was his home, and he would fight to the death to protect it. The Doomsayer, too, was beginning to tire, his dark magic draining him of his strength. But he refused to surrender, convinced that he was right and that the Fire Wizard was wrong. In a final bid to defeat him, he unleashed a devastating blast of energy that sent the Fire Wizard flying across the battlefield. As the dust settled, the Fire Wizard struggled to get back to his feet, his body battered and bruised. But when he looked up, he saw the Doomsayer standing over him, his eyes blazing with fury and madness. "I have won," he declared, raising his hand to deliver the killing blow. Doomsayer defeats Fire Wizard. And so I shall enter it into the bracket. And now, Cat Burglar versus Dread Knight. And I see this podcast is probably going to be a lot more succinct than the last one, since I'm using a little different way of doing it. This might actually be for the better, though, because the last one, I was kind of, waiting for that simulator thing to load a lot, and I was just kind of like, oh, okay, well, here we are waiting. This one, I've got it a little more prepared, so the episode will be shorter, but probably for the better because it's kind of more, got a better flow to it. But anyway, Cat Burglar versus Dread Knight. This is a pretty good one. In the dark of night, the city was alive with the sounds of stealthy footsteps and muffled meows. The cat burglar crept through the shadows, her eyes fixed on the glittering jewels in the display case of the high-end boutique. She had been hired by a wealthy client to steal the rarest diamond in the store, but she had not counted on the unexpected arrival of the Dread Knight. As the cat burglar reached for the diamond, the knight burst into the store, his armor gleaming in the dim light. He was massive, towering over the thief, with his sword raised high. "You shall not take what is mine," he roared, his voice echoing off the walls. The cat burglar snarled, baring her teeth. She knew that this would be a fight to the death. With quick reflexes, she dodged the knight's first swing and lunged at him with her own dagger. But the dread knight was too strong, and he countered every strike with ease. Back and forth they fought, their blades clashing in a flurry of steel and sparks. The sound of their battle echoed through the streets, drawing a crowd of curious onlookers. Some cheered for the fearless thief, while others jeered at the arrogant knight. But the cat burglar was no match for the dread knight's skill and strength. Excuse me. As the fight wore on, she grew tired and weak, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The dread knight sensed victory within his grasp and pressed his advantage, striking again and again until the cat burglar fell to the ground defeated. With one final blow, the dread knight ended the life of the brave cat burglar, leaving her lifeless body lying among the shattered glass and scattered jewels. The crowd gasped in shock and horror, but the knight did not hesitate. With a triumphant cry, he raised his sword high overhead, declaring himself the champion of justice and order. And so, the dread knight emerged victorious, his name forever etched in the annals of history as the protector of the realm. But the memory of the cat burglar lived on, inspiring future generations of thieves and adventurers to challenge the status quo and seek their fortune in the shadows. Dread Knight is the winner over the cat burglar, and so it shall be entered. All right, so just to reiterate, we've had the Conjurer and the Alchemist face off. The Alchemist won. Fire Wizard and Doomsayer faced off. Doomsayer came out on top. Cat Burglar and Dread Knight was victorious. Thanks so much for tuning in to episode 2 of the Talisman Wizard podcast series. Looking forward to bringing more content to you as time goes by, hopefully on a consistent basis. That's the plan anyway, but if you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to comment on any of my videos, or you can also send an email to thetalismanwizard@gmail.com. Love to hear from y'all. All right, well, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe, and it's much appreciated. Have a good day, Talisman fans.